Kyle Thompson.
And you're listening to General Intellect Unit. And this time we are talking about Act 4 of Kentucky Route Zero. If you didn't catch the first couple of episodes of the series, go back there and start from there. Act 4 is what a monster. It's a long one, and it's brutal. But before we get there, we should talk a little bit about the interlude between Acts 3 and 4, titled Here and There Along the Echo. This thing is so silly. I love it. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's where we get introduced to a new character. Well, we've seen him very, very briefly in Act 2, but shows up here as a voice character for the first time. This is Will, who is the proprietor of, what's it called? The
Bureau of Secret Tourism?
The Bureau of Secret Tourism, which is not, in fact, a bureau. It's actually just Will's pet project.
Oh, fantastic. And oh, wow. This guy is nuts, right? So, we've seen him before. He was the organist in the Bicycle Shorts, and he was the person operating the sound desk at the entertainment. So we get a voiced character here, and it's... The setup here is so weird because it's just the whole thing is just a shot of a telephone, and you pick up the handle and you dial the number that's on a slip of paper beside the telephone and get this beautifully cheesy intro music, and Will introducing you to the concept of this Bureau of Secret Tourism, and these like menu options, and you dial through the menus. It's wonderful.
So this was originally an actual phone line that people could dial into. But for the purposes of posterity, it's been turned into an element of this video game.
Mm-hmm. So at some points in the dialogue tree here, you will prompt you to call back at an extension to leave a message for various purposes, and that's what the hook was for the real phone line. Like that, if you actually dialed this number, you would get through to it, and if you dialed those extensions, you could actually leave the messages, which we'll come back to is in Act 4. We will hear playback of some of these messages that people left.
Yeah, it's kind of a player or audience participation dimension of this game. And, obviously something is lost in this recreation of it, because you call the extension and obviously you can't,
it just goes blank. Yeah.
You can't leave a message. So the interactive dimension of this is significantly reduced compared to what it was.
Mm-hmm. Which is a shame, but hey, it becomes fairly apparent pretty quickly that Will is insane as well. Like that, because the menu options here are very strange, and he'll be like, oh, so for let's read out the thing. So, so it's like the initial options are: for a menu of our resources, press 1. If you have an extension to dial, press 9. For more information about our organization, press 3. If you don't remember dialing this number at all, press 5. And there's stuff like, if you're holding a snake and you don't remember why, press this number. He does this weird, really fun, subtree where it's different kinds of water, where he'll play back a sound of water and then be like, that was fast water. And then a different one, that was water from a cup. It's like, this guy is nuts. And it comes across so beautifully in the voice acting and the dialogue.
Definitely very eccentric, but most of the things that we see discussed in this phone tree are things that are going to show up along the echo. So he's kind of documenting this strange, magical, realist place, and without the context, it just sounds insane.
It sounds deranged. Yeah.
It is pretty much, a tourist guide of the echo. It's just not a very good one, because it's very empirical, and it doesn't actually frame the subject for you in any useful way. It's just oh, here are things that are on the echo, but what is the echo? What are these things? Why are they there? What is the context? None of this stuff is included. It's just oh yeah. For instance, if you don't remember dialing this number, right? That seems like a very strange thing. But we later learn that there are all kinds of switchboard problems that are happening on the Echo.
Yeah, true, right?
So there's actually a reason for that entry to be there. It's just not explained why it would be there. So it's very much like laying breadcrumbs for the audience to sort of refer back to as they play through Act 4.
And it's doing that thing again where it's priming the player for what's coming next in the main act. And this is priming you for the bizarreness and distorted reality of the Echo River. And
I guess, what was your impression of Will from...
He seemed like a friendly older chap, and definitely had a kind of weird drifter vibe about him, but like also highly educated, because like he can talk authoritatively about birdsong and music and wildlife and life on the river. It seemed like this guy reminded me a lot of, very knowledgeable older folk who are a bit strange. I don't know. I don't remember getting any other very strong impressions, though.
I found Will to be quite tedious, and it's mostly in his delivery. Like, he speaks in this very languid, slow cadence, and he never really has a point to anything he's saying.
It's very rambling.
He's just recounting things, and they just kind of end with no apparent reason. So he kind of reminds me of like very long-winded Texans, but he's, as you said, he's quite educated. He's got a different vibe to him, this kind of like mellow drifter vibe, instead of just someone who is very animated about telling you something of no consequence, because they're so caught up in their own mental narrative. So whenever, Will's dialogue came up in Act 4, I always like read it to myself in this voice that you get on here and there along the Echo. So like incredibly slow, just kind of meandering. He's very much the sort of like avatar of the Echo, right?
Yeah, definitely, right. He's the kind of guy who's going to be just like sitting there with a fucking fishing line tied around his toe, just taking it easy. Yeah, I'm with you. I think that it's a bit much. Perhaps I think it's done some violence by the structure of the phone menu, because in a lot of cases you actually have to put down the receiver and dial the number again to get back to the main menu, it's a lot. Like I kind of wish they'd put in something like if you press the hash key, it would just dump you back to the main menu. And having to hear those couple of introductory spiels again and again to get through most of the dialogue tree is a bit much. I think this is probably the only part of this whole saga that I struggle to think that I'd ever actually play through again in full. Like, I think I would basically skip this one most times from here on out, because I think I've gotten everything out of it.
Yeah, I've done it. I've done the full thing twice at this point. So I think it's it's certainly like incredibly cumbersome dealing with the interface to this. But I guess there's a couple dimensions to that. The first is that we're going to see in Act 4 a whole lot of focus on archaic analog media, which has been something that we've seen a lot in the game as like interactive media or modes of communication. But these often tend to be in Act 4 records, things that have been recorded on archaic analog media. And we get that certainly with, the Bureau of Secret Tourism. It's very, very cumbersome. And the second thing is it feels true to Will's character that he wouldn't actually go through that much effort to he wouldn't go through that much effort to make it a good user experience, because he'd just be like, well, who cares? You can just time is immaterial. You just kind of vibe with it.
Yeah, 100%. There's a couple of interesting points here as well. That like Will does say that the this phone line is unwittingly loaned to us from the Bureau of Reclaimed Spaces. So this is the phone that's on the desk in the waiting area of the fucking bureau,
where we found the brochure from the Bureau of Secret Tourism in Act 2. Yeah.
I just love that idea that they've unwillingly loaned him the phone line, or unwittingly.
Yeah, and there is a scene later on where we actually see the phone getting run in the Bureau of Reclaimed Spaces.
Yeah. Oh, it's fantastic. I just also want to highlight, by a long stretch, the most obnoxious part of this, which is like down in a sub-menu. It's like you dial through to a menu that's about sounds, and he's like, a couple of options, and then if you are hearing organ music, press 3. And if you press 3, he goes, oh, lucky you. Does it sound like this? And then plays like solidly 12 minutes of fucking organ music over the phone to you. And if at the end of that you answer yes, he's like, oh, that's fine. I don't know where that's coming from. But if you answer no, he's like, yeah, it's really nice though, isn't it? Let's listen to it again. And just plays the fucking thing again. And the only way out of it is to hang up. And it's like, oh my God, it's a lot. There's also a very cute submenu where it's about birdsong, identifying different birds. And so he takes a weird character turn here where, like, for one of the options, he's like, that's the lonesome teal, an ugly, spiteful little thing. It's like, wow, that's kind of weird considering how jovial and laid back he's been. But hey, there's a lot of fun here. It's just, there's not much to talk about, really. It's more of a audio kinesthetic kind of experience. I don't know. I might try that phone line and see if it's still hooked up. It'd be good fun to dial it at least once. But hey, I have a feeling that wouldn't be the case anymore.
It's been shut down by the Consolidated Power Company.
Oh, I'd imagine, yeah. Damn. Oh well, skeletons get to take away all the good stuff. So, Act 4. Wow, what a fucking monster! It's very oppressive in atmosphere. Very slow, very high pressure, weirdly. And the themes here are really interesting and strange. Like, it's a very marked change of tone and pace, because the pace is now dictated by a boat. You don't get to go as you please. And the themes are now shifting from, kind of following on from the regret theme of the previous act, shifting into memory and forgetting and loss and these like transitions and thresholds. And a strong theme of like lives as accumulations of memories, some of which the characters very much want to repress and not have lived.
Yeah, it's in many ways a liminal space, but it's a very kind of fuzzy line, you could say. We go from the climax of Act 3 into this falling movement, falling action, but there's very little action. It's like an extremely long tail after that ramp up in Act 3. That is, it's drifting literally along a river, which is basically like the river version of the Zero. And it doesn't focus on Conway anymore. He's very much turned into an NPC. And we get a lot of time, this time around with, Shannon, and quite a bit with, Johnny and Junebug, and a little bit of time with Ezra as well. But Conway is a kind of shadow in the background that is just, he's just basically drinking himself to death in a very depressive way. He's a very sad drunk. So, yeah, I think mean, that's kind of what there is to say about the generalities of this place.
Well, I guess one more thing is that you definitely can't see all the material at once, because the stops along the river are in paired scenes, where you can either stay on the boat and see one scene, or get off the boat and see another. So you need to do 2 run-throughs of this act to see everything. Generally, the on-boat scenes are quite short and compact, whereas the more epic, sprawling scenes that we're accustomed to are off the boat.
That's right. And I guess there's one other thing to say about this chapter, which is that I'm trying to remember.
Oh no!
my train of thought was interrupted. I think. Oh boy,
that's too resonant with the themes here. I don't like it.
It's too resonant. You have to keep it in there. Yeah, I think it might come back to me. We'll see. It's here and there along the echo. Who knows?
Somewhere. Christ. Oh well. So we get this cold open on a mechanical mammoth. This is the mammoth we saw in the very last frame of the previous act, and it's fritzing out. And Will is standing there in front of it. He's the mechanic trying to fix this thing. So he's reading the manual, which has some interesting bits in it, like with the context backlash and stuff like that. That's very reminiscent of cybernetics.
Yeah. Well, it's very interesting. Like, the mammoth on the back of this ship is obviously like an animatronic creature, just like you'd see at Chuck E. Cheese or whatever, or used to, I guess. But when you read the manual, there's this kind of suggestion of like effective gears and stuff. And it's like, it reminded me a lot of Ashby's homeostat in Design for a Brain. Listeners who have listened to our Pickering episodes might remember this. It was a very strange mechanical computer that would react to its environment, and just sort of was like incomprehensible to everyone who encountered it. And that's very much what the manual for this mammoth reminded me of. Yeah,
definitely, right, because it's presenting the mammoth as a sensitive machine that's quite sensitive to its environment, and it's described almost as like a living system, right? Like the debugging of this thing is going to be very hard because it's essentially alive, and some of the some of the like chapter headings are quite evocative. Like it has a chapter on the passage of time, which is like they have to do a philosophical treatise on the nature of time before they can explain how that affects the mammoth. But as Junebug walks up to Will just chucks the fucking manual into the water and is like, "Yeah, be done with this."
Yeah, he's only a mechanic in the barest sense of the term. He's like a person who has been told to do mechanical work, but has no actual specialty in this stuff.
De facto mechanic. Whereas Junebug is an actual mechanic, and they have a bit of chatter about that. Notably here, Junebug is dressed rather smartly, like an admiral. She has a cool coat on. And later we'll see that Johnny is dressed a bit like Jacques Cousteau, right? The French nautical guy with the red hat. And that I have to wonder, where are they keeping these outfits? Because they don't have any luggage with them, it seems. I wonder if they've got like hollow chest cavities, right? That there's a wardrobe in there, because like they changed their outfits quite a bit over the course of these couple of acts.
Possible, but jackets are bulky, so might be tough. I think they do mention them in Act 4 here once or twice. Of like well, this is one of the parts of our lives that we enjoy is like changing outfits according to our mood and stuff.
Playing dress up, yeah. I just have no idea where they would keep them, because like there's clearly no room for that on the bike either. But hey, so the opening chatter is pretty straightforward, right? Like they've picked up the crew or our gang. They've picked them up at the Bureau of Reclaimed Spaces, and they're tagging along on the river now. And Will he's wondering, because like he has this kind of dialogue that he's been on this river for more than half of his life, right? And he's seen all sorts of things come and go, and and he's wondering what kind of a night this is going to be. Like it's one of these nights where he's going to meet a lot of new strange people, or where he meets an old friend on an unfamiliar shore. Wonder which of those it's going to be. It's very like like a Shakespeare opening. It's like, on this accursed night, what foul fate awaits our plucky whatever.
Well, and this is like interesting because the whole thing is being recounted by Will, and this is kind of Will's story. But because Will is a character who has no real direction, it's just sort of it's interesting how everything that happens is a consequence of what began or what was incited by the climax, right? That's what a falling action is. But where the whole falling action is reframed from Will's perspective. So you get this very strong sense that, like, yes, all of this is meaningful for our main cast of characters. But for Will, this is just another night. Like, he runs into these kinds of people all the time.
All these weird drifters. There's even like I think it's actually going to be after we set sail, after the next scene, but like, and as he's narrating a lot as we go along the river, that he says like, oh, one night this gang of weirdos came aboard. There was a woman, a kid, 2 robots, and a guy whose name I didn't get. And it's like Conway is drifting into the background so much that even for Will, retelling the story, he's like, I don't even really remember who that person was.
He's typically just referred to as the old man in this act by other people because he's not really bothering to introduce himself or anything. He knows where he's going.
He's hanging around, yeah, and he's quite confident of where he's going to end up. Yes, we get the first proper title card for the Mucky Mammoth, which is the name of this little boat, and we're following Shannon. She's standing at the prow of the boat, and she can go around either to talk to Kate or to Will. She has to talk to both, basically. Kate is the captain of the ship. She's around one side, and she kind of just setting us up for like regrounding our expectations of what's going on. That we're on our way to Dogwood Drive. But it's going to be a couple of stops first before we get to the Silo of Late Reflections, which is the stop-off for Dogwood Drive. So we're going to be on board for a while. There's a couple of things to do before we get there, because this boat does things like picking up garbage and mail, doing errands, deliveries, odd jobs, and so on.
Yeah, it's so weird because it's a tugboat, but it doesn't tug anything.
It's so unsuited to this task. Yeah.
It's like, it's actually, like, I mean, I don't know, like, I assume tugboats are a thing on, like, the Mississippi, but I don't know if they have, like, other kinds of, like, riverboats, more like a patrol boat that would do this kind of work. You know, it's sort of a strange fit that it's a tugboat. Well, and then, of course, there's a giant mammoth on the back for no reason.
Does anyone ever explain why?
Like, I guess you could hook things up to its snout. I don't know.
It's so fucking strange, like that mammoth is there. But yeah, it's weird. I guess it's that kind of theme of like this precarious repurposing of driftwood, basically. That like maybe Kate just found the boat one day and was like, "Oh wow, cool. We'll go do some river stuff."
And the boat itself as a set piece is really quite impressive, right? It's again one of those scenes where the camera will rotate around the. It's very like theater in the round kind of a set, where the camera just like rotates around this boat. But it's interesting because the boat sort of bobs up and down with the waves and the water, and it's like rocking back and forth, and the camera pans around it very smoothly. And then when you go inside, the walls sort of like fade away in this really interesting pattern. So you can see the interior of the boat. So yeah, I think this was probably the way that the panning around the boat was so smooth was technically the most impressive thing to me about this chapter.
Yeah, definitely, right. And I think both for this boat and for a bunch of other locations, they're doing a lot of this physical modeling stuff where, there's these very lively environments. And I think it works so well that you barely notice it until you do notice it and you're like, wow, geez, they're actually doing a lot here that's not really standard. And I could then imagine I could imagine a much worse version of this where they didn't have the physical modeling or the bobbing or any of that kind of stuff, which would just look so much less convincing as like, oh, these people are on a river. It was super impressive technically. And maybe going back to limits and demonstrations, it's that thing that they were testing there, the physical modeling, like three objects rubber banded together, how do they interact sort of thing.
Right. And the difference here is that the camera's on the outside instead of the inside of the circle. But it is really impressive, and it's very much like a really cool, detailed diorama that you can interact with.
It is very much so. One of the details I love from when you go inside is that like you can see the some of the pipe work and so on, but you can also see the little hermit crabs scuttling around in the spaces, and they've got their like printer cartridge shells on. It's very nice. There's a dog here, Valkyrie, who's Kate's pet. She also, like, Shannon asks about the cat that's on board, and Kate has no idea that there was a cat on board. So hey, it becomes apparent that Kate is very into mushrooms. She's offering tea made of mushrooms and so on. And she also mentioned something that, like, Shannon, oh yeah, you could go down to the video room if you like and have a poke around in there. We've got some really weird tapes, which will become relevant later. If we flip over to the other side, we can talk to Will, who gives us a bit more of a backstory of his life as a drifter. He was a classically trained organist and a minor in French literature. He used to teach theatre at the local university, hence his role in the entertainment, until budget cuts left him in the role of a janitor, and then he just basically left. He's been drifting ever since and drifted down to the Echo. You've got a note here that he's definitely Tom. I guess so, yeah.
Yeah, he's definitely Tom O'Brien. Like, he's a classically trained organist. He has done pretty much everything. He's got a story for everything. And, it's just, he's a very Tom character.
Very much so, yeah. I wonder what Tom would think of that.
I think Tom is a much more sort of, lively person. But they've got that kind of similar biography about them, which really made me laugh, because the first time I saw the organist, I was like, "Oh, it's Tom," and then I heard this life story, and I was like, "It's definitely Tom."
It's oh, fantastic! Yeah, there's another detail here that is quite odd, and like it hints at a lot of tantalizing possible things about this character that aren't really fleshed out entirely, but are there in hint form. That he seems to be very preoccupied with forgetting. And like deliberately forgetting, right? Like that his whole shtick is about memory and stories, but specifically about amnesia and like deliberate amnesia. Because he remarks here that, where's the quote? Anyway, that's all I try to remember anymore. I listen to the river stories, and my own stories get fainter and fainter. Which will be a recurring theme with him, that like his own, there's something in his past that he desperately wants to erase or to forget about. Which I think, to the story's credit, I don't think ever actually put on screen or give you any real explanation for. It's just a trait of his character.
Well, he says like he was a wanderer on the land, like he used to just kind of walk across fields and stuff, and then he ended up getting this job at the university. It's, you can kind of imagine he might have had a rough start to life in some way.
Yeah.
And then just the fact that, like, university budget cuts destroyed any sense of stability in his life. That kind of trauma is maybe worth forgetting as well.
I definitely think so. I guess maybe what I was thinking was that, like, I could imagine a much worse version of the story that, like, actually tells us what the trauma was. Whereas, like, they play a very nice game here of, like, hinting at this stuff without ever revealing it. At this point, Ezra runs up to Shannon looking for batteries for Johnny's tape recorder. Shannon just fishes 6 batteries out of her pocket and gives them. He's like, yeah, these will probably work.
They're all different types.
At least one of these might work.
It's like, do you have any batteries? She's like, of course.
Yeah.
Like, who do you think I have? Of course I have batteries. But then she has, like, 1 AAA, 1 AA. It's like, there's no pairs of anything, but then it happens to work.
It somehow works. I wonder, he's doing that trick where you put the one good battery in with the dead one, and get like a quarter of the lifetime out of them. But Ezra pops inside then, and we get this little transition to where the walls peel away. Our two musicians are sitting there with this new character, Clara, who's also a musician. She's out on tour, and these folks know each other from way back, right? Like they've intersected before. There's some mention of her doing a show tonight, and that Serrano, this other musician, is playing at the Rum Colony, which is lampshading a place we're going to go to. Johnny's thrilled that Ezra's found the tape recorder and found the batteries for it, and tasks him with going around the ship, just recording found sounds, for fun, which is sweet.
He's getting Ezra on that like found music kind of Puya style music.
Yeah. It's going to get him into wall noise, get him into some real fucking crazy stuff. But it's also just very sweet that Johnny is like concerned with keeping Ezra entertained, like he has a toy to play with, which is setting up this other, I guess, it's a continuation maybe of something that was hinted at in the previous act, but this is the act in which Johnny and Junebug will start to take more of a kind of parental role over Ezra, or at least you'll have the option to. I consider that stuff canonical, though. Like, fuck anyone who doesn't go that path, with these characters.
Yeah, I think I somehow ended up not getting that, but it was weird this time around because I seemed to answer things that were directed that way, so I don't know what happened exactly, but
I'm curious then, like, I wonder how many hidden flags this thing tracks for certain things to play out in Act 5, because it's always seemed to me like it was one of those things you could get, like, I don't know, how many flags is it keeping track of to make that work? Very weird.
Yeah, I don't know.
Strange.
But the other thing I realized about Johnny and why Junebug calls him Cricket is because it's, John, nickname for John is Jim, and it's Jiminy Cricket, right?
Okay, gotcha.
The character, fictional character. So that's where the name comes from, I'm pretty sure.
Interesting. Okay. That makes sense. That makes quite a bit of sense, actually. I guess, yeah, so like Jiminy Cricket and then a Junebug, it all ties together. If Ezra goes and records the cat for a couple of moments, like the camera does this nice little zoom in and like a focus kind of sound, and the tape sound is there, which is actually one of the really nice ways of getting close-ups on these models. Sometimes these can make for very fun little micro scenes. But while he does that, Conway walks into frame holding a beer can, and also his arm is now a skeleton glowing orange thing, which is very disturbing to look at. At that point, then, the control of the camera actually silently switches to Conway as he walks out, and you don't have control over this. He will walk out of the hatch and walk up to where Shannon is, which is maybe hinting at the loss of control of Conway that we're going to have more of. Shannon is concerned, as always, for his drinking. Conway actually forgets why he came up. He's kind of, which is, again, this memory theme that we're going to see repeated, that like, he's like, oh, that thing where you walk through a door and you forget why you walked through it. And we close out on Shannon kind of asking, like, do you really need to go work at the distillery? And he's like, yeah, you need to repay his debt. Like, he's doing that thing that Harry does. A debt's a debt. That kind of very, like macho sort of commitment to misery.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, well, you gotta pay your debts. Like, just, ignoring the situation, the context, why it happened, all that kind of stuff. It's like, well, you gotta pay your debts. That's the thing people say you should do.
Ah, man, renege on that shit. Move to California. They'll never find you there. Actually, this is an interesting one in that, like, the solution to this is actually so old-timey. It's just like, do what people did back then. Just fucking skip town and go to California. They're going to find you out there, man.
Yes, totally.
Do the skeleton people have agents out in California? Probably not. We switch then to I guess it's what counts as the overworld here, where it's the river. We have the little animation of the boat, the little wireframe boat bobbing down the river, where Will is recounting these kind of like for every one of these overworld things, it'll be Will reciting some shaggy dog story or whatever. And a lot of them, they're cute, but they're like kind of inconsequential. And I find myself just kind of tapping the X button as fast as possible to get through some of these. Probably now is the 4th time I've seen them, so...
It's kind of painting the scene of what the Echo's like.
Yeah, which I guess, yeah.
He does make this point about... his perspective is that the more stories are told and passed around and retold, the more real they are. It's just kind of, I think you had written here, truth is communal. Don't agree with that. I find this to be very dubious.
It seems highly motivated, right? For Will, like he desperately wants this like fictive angle to work for some reason.
Yeah, and like I think Will in that regard kind of reminds me of like like a QAnon person or an anti-vaxxer, but without all the vitriol. Like he's like very mellow, but he has that same kind of like engagement in fiction that conspiracy theory folks do.
Yeah, definitely, right. Don't get this guy Facebook. It'd be awful.
And no, definitely don't give this guy Facebook. Just keep him on that Bureau of Secret Tourism. But yeah, I mean, it just reminded me of like a friend of mine who volunteered around Fukushima after the tsunami hit there and after the earthquake. He was doing his master's degree on rumors because he was really interested in these kinds of malicious rumors that spread in the wake of the disaster. And like why they spread, how they spread, and like these were things that were not true and caused people to actually get hurt, And I think when I encounter somebody like Will, who's just like, oh yeah, the more you tell stories, the more real they are. It's like, well, yeah, they're real in the sense that they have effects, but it doesn't mean they're true.
Is that definition of reality as just like having causal force,
Yeah. So I find this, this dimension of Will is quite harmless and eccentric, but if you take his theories to their logical conclusions, it's really quite ugly. So yeah, I mean, it's, these are people who are existing on that kind of like, I think as you put it, they're like right at the water level, right on the border of, you mentioned this in the green room, of being underwater. And at that level of precarity, maybe this weird dreamlike state is a good coping mechanism.
Yeah, that's definitely the context to keep in mind, is that like the Echo River is, I mean, it definitely runs alongside the Zero, but like it seems on some level to be ontologically below the Zero somehow. Like it's even further underground. And the people we meet here are somehow even more precarious and closer to disaster than the people above ground. And like there's remarks along the way that like when there's a storm, things wash down from the surface into the Echo. And so some of the landmarks we encounter actually were above ground before. And there's a sense that everything is sinking. It feels like the kind of dreg heap in Dark Souls 3, like this like pit at the end of time where everything falls into eventually. And like, yeah, the people here seem even closer to disaster and like just literally closer to the waterline, closer to drowning than they did before. And it's an incredible escalation of tension at the same time as they do this like very languid, easy pace. It's somehow more oppressive, even with that kind of relaxed pace, which is quite an achievement. So we're going to go through the scenes as we get them, and we're going to do them in pairs. I guess the way I've ordered them in the notes is that we have the off-boat scene first and then the on-boat scene. So the first off-boat scene is a gas station, which Kate notes seems to be in the wrong location tonight. because things on the Echo change location. This gas station is not actually moored to anything; it's just drifting on flotation devices. The general structure of the scene is that Junebug and Johnny are just hanging around at the gas station. They're trying to get snacks before they get back on board. Junebug goes in first to look around while Johnny hangs out with Val, the dog, and has a chat. And then they switch around. Johnny goes in. And the general content of their thoughts is that they're starting to wonder if they could... So, firstly, they seem to be they're at a crossroads, right? Like, they say to Kate that, like, we just don't know where we'll be tomorrow. And they're both kind of ruminating on whether they could have an extra person come along with them, either maybe a pet or maybe Ezra. This is where we start to get those explicit options to, like, have the characters nudged in the direction of adopting Ezra. Which may spoiler for Act 5, but whatever. We're this far in, you know. What can you do?
Did you get the scenes with the people who come into the gas station and chat with the characters?
I did. So you get two people, Norm and some other guy. They're cute little interjections, but I guess that maybe this act has a lot of this where it's like very cute and twee sort of interjections from characters and like commentary from Will that is just really tangential to the main plot, which is weird because at this point in the like progress of the game, I'm now very, very interested in the main plot and like where these characters are going. But then I find a lot of the time when I've played through this act, I'm like, whatever, Norm, get out of the fucking way. I want to hear about this like tension that's going on in Junebug's head, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting here because we start to actually get solo scenes with Johnny, I think for the first time in the game. So that's kind of cool that we get a little bit of his interiority. Yeah, like it's that extremely extended falling action, right? That like, you know, we've had the climax. We want to see what the consequences are. And when they just kind of piece them out very slowly and languidly throughout this chapter, as opposed to being like, okay, there's the climax and this is what happens.
Yeah. I mean, I will say that, like, I think the content here is all good. It's just maybe a bit much in some dimension. Like, the sort of Shaggy Dog stories and stuff are, like, they're all good, but there's just a lot of them, and it can feel like a bit of padding. Especially, maybe it's just for me. It's
uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You know, it's an uncomfortable play to go through Act 4 because it's sort of like, are we there yet? There's a lot of that.
And I guess, I just found Norm's problem with his meeting someone for a date or whatever was just so much less interesting than what was going on inside Johnny's head, you know? Even if it was fine content on its own right, it's just like, yeah, I want to hear more about Johnny and Junebug, you know? But hey. Towards the end of the scene, they're kind of I think it's maybe Junebug is starting to wonder, or maybe it's Johnny, he's kind of pitching the idea. It's like, with another person to play with, what else could we be? So they're kind of like, you know, they've been the dynamic duo so far. And Junebug is maybe a tiny bit hesitant that, like, would it mess with our dynamics? And Johnny's thinking, well, it would add to our dynamics, right? If we had someone, if we evolved a little bit further, which is it's very nice to see that someone in this fucking game is doing okay. You know, they're on some kind of upward trajectory. You know, that life is still worth living for someone. You know, anything more to say about the gas station?
I like the music.
Yeah. It's cute.
There's a number of different tracks, right?
I think so, yeah. Because I mean, which reminds me, I got the main soundtrack, and also Ben Babbitt just recently released a companion volume that's like the extras, you know, the bits of music and the like things that wouldn't make it onto the main soundtrack. So you can listen to all those nice things as well if you get that one too. Also, there's a Junebug album, which I got, but I still haven't listened to. It's like, there's a whole fucking album of this stuff. I'm going to have to get into that. Yeah, I like this scene. I like this scene quite a bit. I also love the snacks, like, that Junebug goes looking for, and she's like, rifling through the shelves, and it's like, one of the packets will have, like, does not contain real turnips or whatever on the back. It's just very weird.
Inspired by real vegetables is one of the things it says on the snacks. I've definitely had that kind of snack before in Japan.
Real gas station
it's
stuff.
very funny. Yeah. There's also the gas station attendant who sort of has a conversation, I think, with Johnny about being anonymous and the ups and downs of it. And we sort of get his story about how his life fell apart and he ended up down here.
Yeah, the money ran out or something. He was a trust fund kid.
Yeah, exactly. But he's like, oh, I have a super anonymous face, so, I kind of enjoy being the background scenery to everyone else's life.
Which I guess is lampshading some of the role here, yeah. Anyway. The companion scene for this is where Ezra stays on to hang around in the map room. It starts off with Kate and Ezra at the helm doing navigation. She points out that the compass doesn't actually work down here, so you have to navigate by landmarks. There's a bit about, it's weird that we passed Duck Island before Dinosaur Rock, so that the locations on the Echo seem to shift around arbitrarily, which means that we have to update the maps. This is very interesting to me, and it ties in with the memory stuff, because it reminded me of I think Deleuze's reading of Bergson, right? With about time and memory. That my basic summary of that thing would be that in the usual Newtonian model of time, it's a straight line, and so the past is a linear sequence of events that has a definite ordering to it. But for Bergson and then for Deleuze, it's we don't experience time that way. We experience it in such a way that the past is just an unordered bag of events that are basically arbitrarily related to each other. That's how it feels in memory. And there's a lot of that going on here with the seemingly arbitrary recombinations of memories that Will can conjure up, and the seemingly arbitrary recombinations of locations on the river. Having a resonance with each other. The structure of this space reflects the themes as well. I don't know. It's quite fun. It's very funny that when Ezra goes down to the map room, Shannon is trying out Clara's theremin, and she's fucking terrible at it. It's just very good. Nobody's good at theremin, so...
Yeah, you have to be... It's incredibly difficult to play a theremin, so...
It's a brutal fucking instrument, yeah. Clara's very good at it.
It's very much like one of those things where you don't get out of it what you put in. You put in this so much work to maintain this kind of perfection of form, and you're like, oh yeah, cool. Makes a cool sound. Okay.
Can you imagine someone who practices a lot, for years to get the stylophone sound just right or something? Their technique. It's like a heat sink for effort. It just absorbs whatever you put into it.
Yeah, I guess if you have that kind of mentality, that's
stylophone virtuoso.
Kind of feels like if speed running games, just incredibly demanding in terms of dexterity and memorization and stuff and technique, but doesn't really amount to very much.
It's a libidinal heat dump for people. On the way down, also we get to have a little chat with Conway. The interesting thing here is that his conversation, now that he's drunk, he's much more lively. He's rambling and he's flowing, and he's much more much more of a lively character when he's drunk, in a way that's actually kind of disconcerting. And then we get down to the map room where Will has to update the navigation charts by basically copy pasting and then changing whatever's changed. So Duck Island and Dinosaur Island have to be swapped around. So yeah, it must be pretty hard to navigate down here.
I'm sure. Yeah. It's nonsense, right? There's no rhyme or reason to it. It's just things happen, and then I don't know what the point of the chart even is. I guess sometimes they don't change, so then there's some sort of constancy that might be useful.
It seems to be that the pace of change is relatively slow, or that they just wait for an accumulation of changes to happen and then copy the chart. I don't know. It's all just theme stuff, really, at this point. It's just thematic. When we get our river scene, then Will notes that there's a storm going on above the surface. And there's also another big, long, shaggy dog story about some weird shit. It's good stuff. It's just not plot relevant, really. At least I hope it's not. I hope there's not some hidden detail I've missed in all that stuff.
I don't remember it, so probably not. I think it's, this stuff is very much the same sort of vibe as Here and There Along the Echo. It's like, yeah, it's cool, but there's nothing much to say about it. One thing I did like is, I think it's at the start of this chapter, actually, where Kate's the captain, right? Yeah. Kate sort of calls out one of the water types that Will mentions on Here and There Along the Echo. So it's like, oh, that's like hard water or something. Like, you know, one of the types of water that you get on the river. Like, it's like, oh, yeah, okay, I guess this is actually a thing that's down here. Okay.
Yeah, you got to watch out for hard water and like heavy water. That's the one you got to be real careful of. Yeah, that's great. The next proper scene then is the Rum Colony, which is this like really dreamy tiki bar sort of thing that's on the shore. Also, why is there a shore on this fucking river? Also, like, wouldn't it stink and be full of garbage? But anyway, they've set up a tiki bar at the shore here, and everyone seems to enjoy it. We're in control of Shannon as she capers around this place, and Johnny and Junebug have changed their outfits again into some nice beachwear. It's a nice scene. It's just pleasant to look at, and there's but there is some very plot important stuff that happens too.
Yeah, it's very strange and out of place in a way. But I think the interesting thing for me here was that they're serving rum. They're not serving Hard Times whiskey.
Oh, yeah. Good pull.
It's like, where does that rum come from? But
from the water, from the hard water, you know?
I guess.
Are there just pools of rum in the river, you know?
I don't know. Maybe they get it delivered by the tugboat. But these people, like the owner here and stuff, they seem to be doing fine. Like, they're not precarious in the way that most of the people along the Echo are.
Typical petty bourgeois, you know?
Yes, right. His petty bourgeois is very different from that sorry bar we saw in the entertainment. So, yeah.
No, you're quite right here, because this is the only location in the game that isn't like a burnt out, like, Scooby-Doo wasteland failed sort of place, right? This is doing okay, you know?
People are generally having a good time here. And the alcohol, for the most part, is not portrayed as being like this ominous predatory thing in the way that the Hard Times whiskey is. We get a little bit of that with Conway because he's an alcoholic, but most other people are just having a good time.
Indeed. So Ezra's running about the place. Shannon can just kind of dart around with the flashlight and look at trash on the ground, or talk to some of the people from the Bureau are hanging around here getting fucking loaded for a party. They don't know where Lula is, but they're quite happy to wade out into the water and just be obnoxiously drunk. Except for Rick. Rick is he's off to the side and he's stressed the fuck out. He's lying in the sand. He's got some real interesting lines about stress and burnout. He says, like, everyone deserves a rest, don't you think? Even you and I. Someday the lake and the riverbed will be dry. The shops along it will be bankrupt. The home's empty. The boat's abandoned. See, even the river will rest. Why should we be any different? There's something there is something vaguely sinister about the red glow then and the Mai Tais. But it's not sinister in the way the Hard Times whiskey is.
Yeah, not really. It's yeah. I mean, my sort of feeling in this place was like, God damn, it would be nice to be on vacation. like, you know, like, wow, just imagine, you know, not being in your local neighborhood dealing with COVID and actually having a nice vacation.
So I will confess to the night after playing this act, we were hanging around and I went out and got the components from Mai Tais and we got fucking incinerated on these things. So it was very nice to just sip these sugar flower drinks and forget everything. That was beautiful.
Nice.
Yeah. Will is chilling out here as usual. He's going hard on the chill, as if this guy wasn't slow enough as it is. Like, can you imagine him drunk? You know?
Yeah. Oh, this is great. Where he talks about Conway and Shannon, and he's like, oh, you know, Conway, he's an outward reflecting type who reflects the environment. And you and me, we're the inward reflecting types. You just sort of reflect our own inner experience. And one of the lines you can give to him is like, I'm not so sure about that. And he's like, well, I'll be, but I chose that because I think he's completely wrong. No, like, absolutely not. Like, Conway is not the outward reflecting type. We saw, like, that scene where he put his hand into the fish tank and had that, like, inward reflection. Like, he's very much a person who is tormented by his inner experience. And Shannon...
Conway's like a black hole.
Shannon honestly seems to be more of the outward reflecting type. So I think Will is just kind of full of shit as far as that goes.
He has this like affect of this like philosophical drifter, wino sort of guy. But like, yeah, his insights and intuitions aren't that good often, Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Conway, however, is sitting off in a corner at a table, apparently alone, and he's fucking loaded on these Mai Tais, and he loves this stuff. He's going fucking nuts on this thing.
Yeah, he's giving that kind of talk you get from alcoholics about like, oh, well, this isn't the hard stuff, this is a slow drink. This is, like I can handle this, It's like, no, you can't. You're an alcoholic. Yeah. And he's been giving those kinds of lines on the boat, too. Of like, oh, don't worry about me. I know how to handle my liquor. We, like, absolutely know that is not true.
No. It's evident from his dialogue.
From all of his stuff in Act 3, we know that's a load of shit.
Yeah, I mean, so, like, we know from the backstory with him, but we also know... And it is a really good move of them to shift his dialogue in this way, to make him more loose and rambly, because it's very apparent he's changed quite a bit under the influence of this stuff. He's got some nice spiel then about like that he's surrounded by memories, like he's drowning in old stuff tonight. It's all piled up around him, and he feels like a kind of like he's like an emotional hoarder almost. That it's all still with him and it's all still piled up, and he can't look at anything without being reminded of something else. And so the thing to do now is to drink and just clear all that stuff out of his head.
Yeah, it's drinking, and it's also moving on to the distillery, right? He's a person who cannot be with his own thoughts. He cannot be sort of directed by himself. I mean, obviously, I think everyone kind of has these moods, right? Like of, you're surrounded by your memories and regrets, and everything you look at reminds you of something else, and it's really hard. But Conway has it in an especially bad way.
Yeah, so like what he's hoping for here is that because this is a repeated pattern for him, where he goes off the rails, then he gets blind drunk and then sobers up and gets a job to straighten him out. So that like the trying to keep down a job is what'll dry him out. And the distillery is kind of almost the ultimate expression of that, because he's condemning himself to this hellish servitude forever, and that'll dry him out, maybe permanently. Who knows if he stays on it, or it'll kill him. He definitely has vibes of this like person who like lives in the military. The person who like really appreciates having this like regimented structure to their lives, and like because they can't really function otherwise, and it's fucking tragic.
Like he needs that structure not because he thrives in it, but because it allows him to cope. It's a for him, it is a more tolerable substitute for alcoholism.
Well, but when agency hasn't worked out for you, got to give up on that agency and have it just be structured entirely by the horrendous machine vortex of capital.
Yeah, exactly. He's a very I mean, we'll get into this more, but he's a character a person who cannot live for himself.
Indeed. And we're getting these like first sad hints here that he's actually quite looking forward to going off to work.
Yeah, and I do not read that in a positive light in any way.
No.
This is sad.
Yeah, I mean, it's in the sense that one looks forward to nuclear apocalypse in some very dark moments. It's like it's very. He's not actually happy about it, but there's something deeply weird and twisted about this. That's like, in some framing, it can seem like he's actually quite pleased to be destroyed by this.
Yeah, it's like to deal with anxiety and my ADHD. Sometimes when I'm hyperactive, I will go into binge eating. And it's like, yeah, I can enjoy that in a certain way in the moment, but it's not a good thing. It's like these kinds of self-destructive coping mechanisms that have a kind of perverse pleasure to them. They're still bad.
Yeah. Enjoyment is far too narrow a word to capture all of that, really. There's something hideous going on there.
It's like, oh, I'll just do the destructive thing. I'll do the self-destructive thing, and then everything will be at least different. It's bad.
That's definitely what Conway's got going on here. We get this nice lap steel performance from Serrano, who's up on the stage, while Johnny takes the can around to look for donations. There's some really fun prompts here, because when Johnny takes the can around, the prompt is for the dollar amount that they'll donate. When he gets $5 from Shannon, he thinks to himself that she didn't have to do that, because then it's like this whole thing is the unsteady steadying the unsteady, right? That there's the same $20 bill is just going up and down the zero and the echo, and everyone's trying to keep everyone else afloat.
Very familiar with this.
Oh yeah, absolutely. With Conway, there's an interesting remark that he seems to be keeping odd company tonight. Which leaves you wondering if the robots can see something we can't quite yet. And with Will, there's a fantastic one where the prompt is for $0, and Johnny just thinks Will never has any money. Good for him, and moves on.
Let's live in his communism of one.
Yeah, absolutely right. I think they get like $25 from the bureau folk as well. The performance wraps up and they're leaving. Johnny and Junebug remind Shannon to go fetch Conway. And if you walk back up there with the flashlight on, you will see that there are skeletons sitting at the table with Conway. Shannon can't see them, and it looks like Conway's talking to himself, which is all rather frightening. But we can see them. And yeah, apparently Johnny and Junebug can, right? Like, it's pretty strange.
I guess they have a kind of family resemblance. In the sense of being, they've been robots, the robots are powered by something, brings them a little bit closer to the electric skeletons.
Powered by skeleton energy, which is just electricity. Anyway.
So, yeah, I mean, I think that scene where you see them all drinking together at the table, it's very much that, like, dread you get when someone has fallen in with a bad crowd. You're like, uh-oh, this isn't gonna go well.
And it absolutely is not gonna go well. Oh, yikes. The alternative scene for this is for Shannon to stay in the video room and have a look around the videotapes. She does so and finds a tape marked ? And on it is Weaver's broadcast from earlier in the evening. Which instantly sends a shiver down Shannon's spine because she immediately recognizes the hum, the room, and just Weaver standing there in the middle of the room, and the subtitles come up. And this is where we get the actual text of what Weaver said. So I'll quote here. Mail, school, and these magnificent tragic horses. Go underground as deep as you can go. The air is cool and the earth is damp. And when you close your eyes, you are surrounded by the dead. Remember where that is. You'll find your way from there. I think this place is what you are looking for. Some of it will wash away soon, but I think you'll be happy there, even without the mail, school, and these magnificent tragic horses. And the text repeats. It's a looped message. And this is really fascinating, because what Weaver's doing here is she's imploring Shannon to set out on a journey to a happy place. And to start, she has to go underground. She has to go to the mine. But she'll find her way from there, and where she ends up, some of it's going to wash away soon. But Shannon will be happy there, even without the mail, the school, or the horses. This is good, because this kind of redeems Weaver a little bit after her, acts of evil in the previous act. It doesn't redeem that, but it's like, I thought it was really nice, because I didn't see this on my first playthrough, and I actually only just saw it on this one. I really appreciated getting this little bit of detail, and seeing a little hint of what's coming next, because Weaver seems to have pre-knowledge of something that will happen later.
That's right. She's predicted the flood that Will was mentioning in retelling the story. It's, we see a little bit of humanity from Weaver here. We see she actually demonstrates some care for Shannon. This is, very different from her usual portrayal as this strange alien person with, this incredible mathematical and technical skills that just sort of passes through place to place working on different projects.
And just alienating everyone she ever encounters. It's very nice. Especially given that, I think later we'll see some evidence that trying to get this broadcast through to Shannon was an act of desperation for Weaver. And that, early on we remarked that, Weaver as a name is obviously a kind of reference to her, spinning the story. She's a spider who's spinning this web. And without this, it would seem that, her intentions in spinning that web were just to lead Conway to damnation. But, there was some positive impulse here to send Shannon to a better place, to an actually nice place to live, even if it cost that.
Yeah, it was a worthwhile trade in her estimation to send Conway to hell and find some redemption for Shannon.
If Shannon asks Kate about this, she'll say that the VCR down there just kicks into life at random and records whatever it happens to be picking up. And the only channel we get down here is WEVP TV, which is a community broadcasting station. She suggests that at some point later, at the telephone exchange that we're going to stop there later, she should try talking to Dashiell, who was a volunteer at that station at some point. And it's oh yeah, you two will get along. You're both into TVs and phones and stuff. Is this the first mention of WEVP TV?
I think so, except for the title screen on the game.
Yeah. We finally get an explanation for what the fuck that means every time you boot the fucking game up. Yeah. Well, I guess the whole thing is framed as if it's being the game is being broadcast by WEVP TV. It's a WEVP production or something, which is quite fun. Yeah, cool. So the river, on the river, Will lets us in on an interesting detail about the Rum Colony, that it's actually owned by a dead man named Vernon, but nobody will identify the body so as to prevent the power company from getting control of the Rum Colony. Yeah, it's quite nice, maybe that's why they're doing fine down there. They haven't been taken over by the fucking skeletons yet. But yeah, the next scene is a phone. I gotta love how, just how little is going on in the title cards for these things. It's just a tree, a phone,
Yes.
But the gang get off on a floating phone platform. Initially, Conway is just rambling to Ezra, and then he just pitches over the side and swims back to the boat. And this is fun because it's one of the very few times the character models animate in any significant way, because Shannon does this visible face palm and shakes her head, and everyone looks kind of dismayed at Conway swimming away. Because otherwise the models don't emote very much.
Yeah, definitely. He's sort of rambling about finding some more liquor, finding the good stuff somewhere. In a medicine cabinet or something. It's that's where they hide it,
Mm-hmm. He's going to get into the adrenochrome.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is worrying. The structure of this thing then is that there's a guy in a red cap who's on the phone, and when he gets off the phone, our various characters get on the phone and switch back and forth. When Will gets on, he checks the messages for the Bureau of Secret Tourism, which brings in a split screen where we can see the phone on the side table with bears wandering around in the background at the Bureau, which is a really fun little detail. These are, as the text plays out, we also get the audio of these messages that have been left on the phone line. It's all stuff like, because the prompts from here and there along the echo are things like, if you don't recall dialing this number, leave us a message. Or it's like stuff like, leave us a message describing your earliest memory, or describing why you can't sleep, and so on. And so it's a lot of these little anecdotes like, I'm about to cross an ocean and I worry about my dog. Or it was tough to hold on to the snake, but my hands are pretty damp. Pretty weird. Or that I can't sleep because the trees are scraping against my window and it reminds me of a tongue scraping against my skin. And it's just, they keep going.
There's 30 messages.
It's a lot. I think I listened to all of them this time. That was fun. When Will switches away, we get and the red hat guy switches on. We get this repeating pattern where people ask Shannon, is like, "Hey, is that guy okay?" And it's like, "Well, yeah." It's either like, "Yeah, he's drunk," or he just needs to get his medicine or something. But like everyone is concerned for Conway and what's going on with them. Kate calls up a client by the name of Summer, a pregnant woman with the split screen shows this really lovely house. Kate is a birth doula, as well as being the captain of the ship. And we get this like early hint, I think maybe in a conversation after she gets off the phone, of like her having this impulse to help women with difficult childbirth.
Yeah, well, and this is interesting because, like, as you said, it's a very nice house. And it's like these scenes we get on the phone are the only scenes we get of places that aren't, like, depressing and horribly run down.
Yeah, they're encaked in mold or whatever,
Yeah, like this, it's just like, oh yeah, it's like, some house out in the suburbs. It's in great shape and very bright and clean.
And then similarly, when Clara calls her sister, we get this lovely shot of like the balcony outside an apartment block, and it's just lovely sunlight. The only sunlight we're going to see in this act, I think.
There is a world outside of Kentucky,
and there's a world outside of the Zero, and it's even worse sibling the Echo. It's just a nice reminder, these little tiny shots of the outside world. At some point, the red cap guy identifies himself as Brandon from the storage facility, and he is still concerned for Conway. He does repeat the anecdote of like Conway just eating the fucking pavement earlier in the night. And like at this point, yeah, Conway is definitely receding into the background and has less and less agency. As the thing that's in the foreground is everyone's concern for him, or they're just like bafflement at like this weird drunk who's hanging around.
Yeah, he's really a sorry sight.
I hope he makes it back to the boat. At this point, I was like, Jesus, is this going to be the end of him? I was like, yeah, Conway drowned. That would be no good. If you are on the Carrington train, the phone will ring and Shannon will answer. And Carrington is at a phone booth, and he's like, for some reason, calling up to. He needs help with the lighting for the play. Because there's apparently the play has there's a lot of focus on like moonlight, and he's wondering how to light that. I think Shannon's suggestions are fun, where it's like just have a guy dressed as the moon stand there with a flashlight, or use a spotlight or whatever. But I think this is probably the last of Carrington. Is that right? Until the very end, until the post interlude.
Yeah. So I think. This bit with Carrington is interesting because he's staging Death of the Hired Hand, and he mentions that the wife in that poem is the main character, whereas when I read it, I took it that the hired hand is the main character. And similarly, at the beginning of the game, Conway is the main character. The Hired Hand is the main character. But in this act, we see Shannon as the main character. This sort of
is his road wife. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the wife in that story is kind of like Lisette, but is also kind of just a witness or a bystander to the death. And I feel like that rhymes with Shannon's role in this act as regards Conway.
Yeah, that's a really good observation. It definitely makes sense. And yeah, well, by now we're well on to the switch of perspectives. It's becoming more apparent that Shannon's the real main character in this thing. The alternative scene for this on the boat is the dogs lounging below deck, which is a solid 5 seconds of the dogs sleeping on one of the decks, which is very cute. But I don't think we have much to say about that scene aside from they're very nice dogs.
Yeah.
I wish them all the luck in the world. Well, that's it for this episode. Join us again next time when we will conclude our discussion of the third act of Kentucky Route Zero. In the meantime, you can catch us on Twitter at GIUnitPod. We're on Facebook, we're on all the podcasting apps, so like, rate and subscribe. You can also go to patreon.com/General Intellect Unit and throw us a couple of bucks a month to help keep the glowing skeletons away from the door and to get access to our community Discord. This show is part of the Emancipation Network, a Marxist podcast network and research collective. Go to emancipation.network and check out our sister shows such as Swampside Chats, From Alpha to Omega, Mortal Science and Jumpsuit Utopia. They are wonderful shows and wonderful folks. Until next time, thanks for listening, and we hope you've enjoyed this show.